with it. We move on. Let's talk about now. Over the past few days, there has been, well, past few weeks actually. It seems every time you turn on the news, there's some new record drug haul that's being found by Border Force. A new record for ice, a new record for cocaine, this, that, and the other. But I love what the Border Force, what the AFP are saying here, which is, look, we can collect this stuff as much as possible, but here's an idea: stop using this shit. Because if you stop using it, then we're actually going to deny the industry the need to keep doing what it's doing. Here's in part what they said in a far classier fashion than I just did.
But we seriously need to have some discussions in the community around the issue around demand. Why is it that we have such a demand for drugs in this country? In 2018, we need to seriously have a discussion as a community as to what we can do to actually stop the demand. Because until we do that, these record seizures are going to continue, and you'll keep hearing from us about the work we're doing to dam the supply, but we need to stop the demand.
So, I mean, Senator Leyonhjelm, as the Libertarian, obviously whatever one does to oneself is their own choice, as long as it's all the rest of it here. But it does seem that we have strayed a long way from the simple messages, which are not just about harm minimisation, but don't take drugs. There's a really simple, boring, uncool, square way of beginning the conversation about drugs. Do we have to get back there?
Nobody will take any notice of it. It's been said over and over and over again. And it's actually interesting that this message is now coming from the AFP from a different person, because it come from the AFP before. A previous commissioner, Mick Palmer, is gone public many times saying we are never going to arrest our way out of this issue. We're not going to do it. I was involved in an inquiry in the Senate. It was a joint committee inquiry into ICE, and he gave evidence at my invitation. He came to Canberra and told us we are not going to arrest our way out of this problem. It's just not possible. You cannot catch all the crims and reduce supply enough to make a difference. We are going to have to reconsider it. I don't like drugs either, but that's not sufficient reason to have this prohibition approach. We've got to think about other ways to do it. And there are other countries in the world that are trying other ways. Portugal, for example, in 2000 decriminalised all drugs. Didn't legalise them, but decriminalised them. So if you're using them for personal consumption, it's not a crime, it's a medical issue. It's still a crime to deal them and sell them, but it's a medical issue. So you're likely to get shunted off to somebody if you're an addict and fixed up. Now, people say, well, that's going to lead to, that sort of thing is going to lead to a massive explosion in consumption and demand. It didn't in Portugal. So, you know, it's time for us to have a good think about what we're doing. Is there a line between the types of drugs or narcotics or whatever that approach works for and not, or is it everything? Well, in Portugal it was everything. My view is stop chasing around after marijuana users. It's ridiculous chasing around after that. And concentrate on the harmful drugs, the ones that actually, you know, ruin people's lives, and ice is amongst those. But in Portugal they did a lot. It is not a crime to have any of these drugs for personal use, so it's not a law enforcement issue. As a result, your coppers can go around chasing serious criminals instead of just users, and you're steering these people into help. Yeah, Senator Hume, what do you think about either changing the conversation or, in my view, part of it being a chat about going back to the initial message about, you know, as uncool as it is, about don't get into this stuff?
Well, I think there's two issues here. The first is, you know, you've got to tip your hat to the Australian Border Force and the AFP for, you know, these successive hauls, very large hauls of illegal drugs is quite encouraging. It demonstrates that the system is working, at least at the supply side. But the Assistant Commissioner is absolutely right. What's the cultural shift that we've experienced that's causing this extraordinary level of demand for illegal drugs? Now, I don't think that David's right. I don't think that decriminalising possession or use is actually the right way to go. But, you know, I think the conversation is worth having as to what might be the solutions. Obviously, if there's been a Senate inquiry or a joint inquiry, I think it was, you said, David, you know, there's some recommendations there that have already been made. Have they been implemented? Have we re-looked at those? You know, there's a problem out there, and we've got to do something about it. I don't want to repeat history and you know, keep doing more inquiries and, you know, more reports. What have we got? What are the solutions that have been recommended? Well, but also it's this thing where, in the same way, going back to the start of the show about, you know, resetting the clock and starting from scratch, all the rest of it here. I mean, part of it has to be about
what we decide to criminalise, what we decide to go after, all the rest. But obviously, too, I mean, the truth is that even if certain things for personal consumption, Andrew, the truth is that this is a pretty awful industry that people would be propping up even for personal use reasons. You know, this is some of the worst stuff in the world that's funded and done so with.
Well, I think I saw a tweet from a paramedic, an experienced paramedic the other day, which said 20 years ago I was picking up people off the streets of Sydney for heroin overdoses. Now it's ice. I wish we were back to heroin. And I think that's the issue with ice. If you look at, you know, even the Ben Cousins example, completely stuffed the guy's head up, like just turning people psychotic, just turning people subhuman at times. And ice is the issue they need to tackle, and the old saying is you only get 10% of what comes through the borders, the cops say, so it's probably even less than that. Yeah, you've just got to stop young people taking ice through education is all I can think of, and they try through ads, they do the best they can. I think it makes some difference, David, but you can't decriminalise that.
Yeah, well,
a couple of hits, you're gone, you know.
No, well, the evidence we got at the inquiry was there was nothing like that. But when they do get stuck on it, it can be quite bad, particularly when they start injecting it. But I mean, yes, I think ice is pretty bad, but we are frightened to try new alternatives. We just keep saying drugs are bad, mmmkay, like Mr. Mackey in South Park. Drugs are bad, mmmkay, and no, you can't try anything else because drugs are bad, mmmkay. That's really as simple.
No, that's fair.
That's as simple as it gets.
But it's this thing where in Portugal, did the quality of the drugs change?
No.
So when I say that is that we know ice, exposure to ice can send you just
psychotic.
Most it doesn't.
Yeah.
It's a party drug, and it's used by quite a lot of people, and they don't go bonkers. Same with heroin. You know, the biggest problem with heroin is getting the money to pay for it. So you commit crimes to do that. But you can live on, if you have enough money, you can live on a heroin habit and live a normal life. Quite a lot of people can take ice as a recreational drug, and it doesn't ruin their lives. It's a bad idea.
But it ruins the lives of people around them, though, David. I think that's the problem. The libertarian view is fantastic. You know, do it as long as it doesn't harm, as long as it's your decision, you do what you want. But it's the lives that it affects around those, whether it be family or friends or workplaces or the crime associated with the drugs. That's where the problem lies.
This isn't really a libertarian issue. I mean, the fundamentals, as you say, there are other people affected by it, and if it is a failure of law enforcement, and as Mick Palmer said, we are not going to arrest our way out of it. Okay, so if we're not going to arrest our way out of it, how are we going to get out of it? I think Portugal, and there's other countries now that are also experimenting with that. I think we've got to look for alternatives, and if we base it on drugs are bad, therefore we've got to criminalise them, therefore we've got to send the police in helicopters and black pyjamas with guns after all the druggies. As long as we're stuck in that mentality, I don't think we'll make any progress at all.
All right, well, we'll leave it there, and I'll give you a couple of minutes now to grab your computer and Google Portugal and drugs, or Mr. Mackey. Either way, whichever you do it with your own, but we'll see you in a couple of minutes here on Paul Murray Live.